Bharat Masrani is the president and CEO of TD Bank. He joins us now. Thanks for being with us, Bharat. Appreciate it. And I did want to start there. I mean, we know from the quarter that your things continue to move along, your revenue continues to grow, but your costs, your loan losses are still being set aside in large numbers. Where do you think we stand in terms of how you can get a grasp on where things go? There's still so much uncertainty.
Yeah, well, nice to be with you again, Amanda, and I hope you're doing well. You saw our numbers. I think you mentioned some of the details. We are better than we were in Q2. I think we saw more distress at our April quarter end than we did at July quarter end. But I think we still live in really uncertain times. It's hard to predict exactly how this might play out. We've seen a gradual reopening in many of our jurisdictions, and you see that reflected in our numbers, where some of our reserves came down. But I think we remain cautiously optimistic, but it is important to be prepared for any eventuality here, because this is a crisis that is unprecedented in nature, and it's hard to predict exactly how things might play out.
And of course, one of the things that's hard to predict is whether we see a resurgence, another kind of lockdown in a worst case scenario, additional businesses hit, or those that are already hit even more. When you look at your loan losses and your set-asides, I mean, as things begin to improve here, and it did feel through the summer as they were, Bharat, are you conservative enough about what might come should we see a big bounce back in COVID?
Well, my perspective in any kind of a crisis, particularly this one, that it is important for a bank, and particularly the way we look at it, that in difficult periods, it's very important to have very good capital levels. I think we have that. We have 12.5% of Common Equity Tier 1 ratio, and to ensure that we are well reserved. So if you look at the level of reserves we've taken, and I should note this on performing loans, I think that's an important sort of distinction to make, is quite substantial. I think over the 2 quarters, I think in the second quarter, our total provisions we took were about $3.2 billion. And this quarter, we took about $2.2 billion. So this is still way above, our normal run rate. But I think it's appropriate to build those reserves, given the uncertainties that all of us have been talking about with this pandemic.
We do know government support is continuing. We've seen some programs extended. What is your view of how much more support might be needed when you look at both the effect on consumers, but also your small business customers?
Well, it has been unprecedented, and I know this crisis is unprecedented, so I'm sure, people would argue that it was entirely appropriate. And I think it is important to have the level of stimulus we've had. And frankly, that's one reason why many people are not able to forecast, the precise sort of track of this recovery, because this has been unprecedented. So we'll see how that plays out. I think to date, things have worked reasonably well. I think if you look at, the growth trajectory in Canada, how quickly, the economy was able to come back to the extent it has. So the job numbers are impressive. But as you pointed out, we got to watch out. This is a health crisis, and until we have the health issue behind us, it's not going to be business as usual, and this will go through spikes. And so we just have to make sure that, government programs, the economy, that we're able to find the right balance to navigate through this difficult period.
With this unprecedented level of government support, it does feel, Bharat, that we've seen a bit of a shift in attitude around government support. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the Husky Energy today, essentially calling for government dollars to keep a big offshore project going in Atlantic Canada. When you think of an Alberta-based energy company asking for the government to bail it out, that's not normal. Do you worry about longer-term effects of government role in, deploying capital and support, but throughout the economy, and the distortion it might have?
Well, I think, it is important that this crisis is for the ages. So, it's going to require, special programs. It's going to require special approaches that may not have been tried out before. And hence, that's what we're seeing on both sides of the border, by the way, in Canada and the United States, if you see, and in other jurisdictions around the world. I think at some point, depending on how sort of far this goes, how long it lasts, some kind of sector-specific programs may be necessary. I do not know exactly when is the right time, But it's something that I'm sure governments are thinking about it. We as a large bank are in discussions, various elected officials, policymakers, to see, what might be appropriate. But to date, I feel, Canada has done a pretty good job in ensuring there's enough liquidity in the market, that folks who need the money have gotten the money. And frankly, once this pandemic is behind us, hopefully, we'll see that spend go up quite dramatically. We're seeing huge deposit numbers at TD and frankly at all the banks. And at some point, those dollars will be spent. And I think, when closer we get to that, better off all of us will be. So hard to predict exact what sector, Amanda. I don't know the specific issue you're talking about, but there are some sectors that are more impacted. And if this goes on longer, then perhaps some special programs might be necessary.
We do hear staggering estimates, though, and they do remain estimates, Bharat, but, 60% of restaurants could close. We have a feeling that job losses will mount from where they are today, even if everything does kind of revert back to normal on the pandemic side. Do you believe that, we talked a lot about household indebtedness long before COVID-19. Do you believe that we're positioned as we need to be to weather that storm, given that government help can't stay at this level forever?
Well, listen, the discretionary part of the economy, and for many reasons, one being, we are in a lockdown. When it's illegal to go out and go to work or go to a restaurant or go do shopping, that is, unprecedented. We don't have a lot of history to guide us through that, and that is going to have impact, and it's going to impact certain industries more than others. And you talk about restaurants, I think hotels fall into that category. The discretionary travel falls into that category. Tourism falls into that category. So there are a lot of sectors here that have been impacted more than others. I think, when we get back to some sense of normalcy, hopefully we see some revival. But without a doubt, this is going to be difficult for some segments of the economy. And hopefully, this crisis is behind us sooner so that those sectors can find ways to reemerge in some form, but there will be some pain. We are in a recession. This is not going to be an easy period. The quicker we get out of it, better off all of us will be. But we should be prepared that there is a chance here this could go longer, and hence the caution that you see out of TD with our capital levels, the level of provisioning we are taking, because we have to be prepared for different eventualities here.
We have seen the government task the banks with deploying some of its programs and support here. One of them, it appears, will be this new $221 million earmarked for Black entrepreneurs, calling on banks and other institutions to kind of help deploy this capital. What do you think of that? The timing of that, obviously, we understand, why it's a kind of a reflection of where we are as a society. From the bank's point of view, is that something that you think will be easy to do here?
Listen, TD has had a long tradition of diversity and inclusion. That's a core part of our culture. We've worked hard at it for many, many years and have done well. There are areas, where we wish we could have done even better. I think one area that has become part of the global conversation is anti-Black racism. And frankly, I've said this many times, I don't think anybody at TD or people that I know are racist, but that in itself is not good enough. We need to be champions for anti-Black racism and champions against, that kind of activity. So I think it is important that these programs, are launched. We are doing a lot in our own bank. And I think this program, which has just been announced, details are being worked out with the various government departments. We are thrilled to be part of it, and I think it will serve the country well.
All right, I do want your lens on what's happening in the U.S. A big part of your business and your growth is in that market. There's obviously a huge political aspect to this question, but how comfortable are you feeling about the trajectory of the economy there?
Well, the U.S. is, listen, it's going through a rough patch now because of the health crisis, and we've seen, different jurisdictions suffer more, and we've seen spikes in certain parts of our footprint. But at some point, I've said this before, this crisis is unprecedented, and it's not like any other. But all crises are common in one respect: all of them end. And this too shall end. And when that happens, the U.S. is a fantastic market. It's a growth market. It's very innovative. It has an ability to transform itself, in very short order. So we are really excited about our U.S. business.